Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 19. Samantha. How would you feel watching your boss take credit for your work in front of 25 colleagues, no less? That's what happened to me one Monday morning. As I sat in the all-hands meeting, Grant Mercer presented my campaign as if it were his own creation. He used my slides. He quoted my research. He even used the tagline I had written at 2 a.m, trying to keep myself awake with cold coffee. And when the applause came, he smiled like a man who had earned it. I sat in the third row, hands folded in my lap. I didn't let the expression on my face change, but inside something had shifted. Something had broken. There was something Grant didn't know. If he had, he wouldn't have dared to do any of this. I had been documenting everything for over 18 months because I had very good reasons to do so. In a folder he would never find, I had recorded every stolen idea, every redirected email, every meeting where my name mysteriously vanished from the credits. From all this, you can probably guess what my work environment was like. A place where I no longer felt safe despite 8 years of loyalty. Grant had assumed that my approach and silence so far would continue, but he was wrong. Because no matter how patient you are, everyone has a limit, and I was now determined to protect that limit. This is the story of how I walked out of that company with every major client and left my boss having to explain himself to the board. My name is Samantha Thornton. For 8 years, I was the senior marketing manager at Whitfield Media Group. Our offices occupied the 29th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, a building where the elevators played soft jazz and the lobby always had fresh flowers. The smell of ambition. I used to love that smell of ambition. Marketing was never just a job for me. The satisfaction of blending creativity with problem solving, building strategy with storytelling, was something else entirely. A competitive environment was tiring, of course, but it also helped me grow. The rush of launching campaigns, watching the numbers climb, landing a client everyone said was impossible, that was my source of adrenaline, what made me feel alive. When I started at Whitfield, I was 26 years old and hungry to prove myself. The company was smaller then, more modest. We had about 40 employees and a handful of mid-tier clients. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. I built friendships with clients, and they trusted me with their brands because I treated their success as my own. This work paid off. Over 8 years, I helped grow Whitfield from a boutique agency into a major player. Our client roster expanded from local businesses to national brands. Revenue tripled. I evolved from an eager new hire into the person everyone turned to when things got complicated. But it never occurred to me that being everyone's go-to person would have a dark side. I was about to discover that. Grant Mercer arrived at Whitfield 3 years ago. He had an impressive resume and a firm handshake. He possessed a confidence that filled the room before he even spoke. The executives loved him immediately. Within 6 months, he was named managing director of the marketing division, my division, the one I had built from the ground up. I told myself it was fine. Grant had more experience in leadership roles. He had connections I didn't have. Maybe I could learn from him, collaborate with him, eventually earn my own seat at the table. That optimism lasted about 3 months. The first time Grant took credit for my work, I almost convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. We were preparing a rebranding campaign for a struggling retail chain. I had spent weeks developing the strategy, analyzing their market position, crafting a narrative that would resonate with their target demographic. Even though I was the one who developed and completed the project, when Grant presented it to the client, he never mentioned my name. Not once. He said, "we and the team," but mostly he said, "I developed, my vision, and my approach." The client loved it. They signed a contract worth $2 million. At the celebration dinner that night, Grant raised a glass and thanked everyone for their hard work. He was blatantly ignoring me. I observed him as much as I could that day to understand Grant's character, his limits, and what he was capable of. The next day, I brought up the matter with him privately. Calmly. Without making it personal, I just wanted to clarify my role in the project for future reference. What do you think his reaction was? He showed that charming smile of his. Then, Samantha, he said, leaning back in his chair, we're a team here. Individual credit doesn't matter as much as collective success. Don't you think that's a healthier mindset? I understood then that he wouldn't back down and was determined to play this game, so I decided to play my own game and set my own rules. I nodded. I smiled back, and I started keeping records. I started documenting as insurance. Still, I hoped I wouldn't need it. My goal wasn't to fight, it was to protect myself. Every email I sent, I BCC'd to my personal account. Every strategy document I created, I saved with timestamps. Every meeting where my ideas were discussed, I took notes with dates and attribution. This wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Grant had a system. He would assign me to develop campaigns, then schedule client presentations when I had conflicts. He would forward my emails to executives with his own commentary added at the top, subtly repositioning my insights as extensions of his direction. He would praise my work in private and erase my contributions in public. The documentation grew thicker, the folder grew heavier, and I waited. Andre Williams was the first person who saw what was happening. Andre was our creative director, a tall man with kind eyes and an ability to read rooms that bordered on supernatural. We had worked together for 6 years, long enough to develop the kind of trust that doesn't require explanation. One evening, after everyone else had left, Andre found me at my desk staring at an email chain. At first, I was uneasy about him seeing it, but then I didn't care. What he saw was that Grant had forwarded my quarterly analysis to the CEO with a subject line that read, "My recommendations for Q3 strategy." Andre read it over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. "Is what I'm seeing correct? How long has this been going on?" "Long enough," I said quietly. He pulled up a chair and sat down. "You know this isn't normal, right? What he's doing?" "I know. So what are you going to do about it?" I looked at him. "For now, nothing. I'm going to keep doing excellent work. I'm going to keep building client relationships, and I'm going to keep documenting everything. I've been doing it for a while." Andre nodded slowly. "So when are you going to take action?" I turned back to my screen. "When the time comes, I'll have options." That conversation stayed with me. Andre didn't push, didn't give fancy speeches, didn't offer unsolicited advice. I felt that he understood and trusted me. It felt so good to know that someone else saw the truth. My small apartment in Hell's Kitchen was like my sanctuary, even though I couldn't spend much time in it because of my work pace. The best part was the view, overlooking the city skyline. After long working hours, I would come home, grab something to snack on, and watch this view with a glass of wine. Recently, reviewing documents had been added to this routine. It sounds obsessive when I describe it now. Maybe it was, but there was something calming about organizing the evidence. Each screenshot, each forwarded email, each meeting note was proof that I wasn't imagining things and that something was under my control. One evening, my mother called while I was sorting through files. I hurriedly found my AirPods buried among the papers and answered. Mothers and their superpowers. How they sense when something's wrong, how they always nail the timing, I still can't figure it out. "You sound tired, sweetie," she said. "Not physically tired, but more like your soul is tired. I think something's bothering you." I laughed softly. "Is that your professional diagnosis?" A mother doesn't need credentials to know her daughter. Then, in a serious tone, "What's going on at your job?" I hesitated. "Nothing I can't handle." That's not what I asked. I set down the papers and leaned back in my chair. "There's this manager. He takes credit for my work, constantly. And I've been documenting it, building a case, but sometimes I wonder if any of it will matter. Maybe I should just quit." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you remember what your grandmother used to say about difficult people? That they reveal themselves eventually?" "That too. But also that the best revenge is becoming someone they can't ignore, not through anger, through excellence." I thought about that long after we hung up. Excellence. I had been excellent for 8 years. Where had it gotten me? But then another thought emerged. Maybe excellence alone wasn't enough. Maybe excellence needed to be paired with strategy, with timing, with the right moment to make excellence undeniable. While I was in the midst of all these complicated thoughts and continuing to document, exactly 6 months later, the real turning point came with a client named Eleanor Chase. Eleanor was the chief marketing officer of Lux Cosmetics, a premium beauty brand that had been struggling to connect with younger demographics. They were looking for an agency to completely reimagine their digital presence, and the contract was worth $8 million over 3 years. Grant wanted that account badly. It would be the biggest win of his tenure, the kind of client that gets mentioned in industry publications and trade magazines. He assembled a pitch team, scheduled strategy sessions, blocked off conference rooms for brainstorming. And then he assigned me to lead the campaign development. I knew immediately what he was doing. He wanted my ideas, my strategy, my creative vision, and of course my labor. Why go the hard way when there was an easier option? When presentation time came, he would stand at the front of the room while I sat in the back, watching my work being presented under someone else's name. But this time, something was different. Eleanor Chase insisted on meeting the entire team before making any decisions. She wanted to know who would actually be working on her brand, not just who would be shaking hands at signing dinners. Our first meeting was at a sleek restaurant in Tribeca, all exposed brick and soft lighting and quiet jazz. Grant dominated the conversation, of course, talking about synergy and brand elevation and market positioning. Eleanor listened politely, nodding in the right places, but I noticed her eyes drifting toward me whenever Grant paused for breath. Finally, she turned to face me directly. "Samantha, right? Grant mentioned you'd be handling the day-to-day strategy. To be honest, I'm curious. Can you tell me about your approach?" Grant's smile flickered for just a moment. I saw it. I leaned forward slightly. "Eleanor, I understand your brand is facing a perception gap. Your products are exceptional, but your messaging feels disconnected from how younger consumers build relationships with beauty brands. They want authenticity. They want to see themselves reflected in your story." She tilted her head. "Go on." I spent the next 15 minutes outlining a strategy I had been developing in my own time. Influencer partnerships that prioritized genuine users over celebrities. Content that highlighted real customer stories. A social media presence that felt conversational rather than aspirational. Interactive campaigns that invited participation rather than passive consumption. When I finished, Eleanor was smiling. Not the polite smile she had given Grant. A real one. "That's exactly what I've been trying to articulate to my board," she said. "You understand us." Grant jumped in quickly, as he always did. "Samantha is one of our most valuable team members. Her insights are always incorporated into our strategic direction." Eleanor nodded, but her eyes stayed on me. "I'll want her in every major meeting." That night, I added a new section to my documentation folder. Client relationships at risk if I leave. Over the following months, I became Eleanor's primary contact at Whitfield. We spoke weekly, sometimes more often. I learned about her struggles with the board, her vision for where Lux could go, her frustration with agencies that treated her brand like a line item rather than a legacy. Grant noticed the shift. He started showing up to meetings uninvited, inserting himself into conversations, copying himself on emails that didn't require his involvement. But Eleanor had already made her preference clear. She would respond to my messages within hours. His would sit unanswered for days. The documentation folder grew thicker, but now it included something new. Evidence of the relationships I had built, the trust I had earned, the value that existed independently of Whitfield's letterhead. At a quarterly business review, Grant made his biggest move yet. He presented the Lux campaign results to the executive team as a case study in leadership, never once mentioning my name. He talked about strategic vision and innovative approaches and client-centric methodology. All words he had borrowed from my emails. I sat in the back of the room, watching the executives nod approvingly. 25 people in that room, and not a single one of them knew who had actually built what they were praising. After the meeting, Eleanor texted me directly. "Interesting presentation. Funny how your name never came up." I stared at the message for a long moment, Then I typed back. Some things are easier to document than to explain. Her response came immediately. I like the way you think. That exchange changed everything, not because it validated what I already knew, but because it confirmed that I wasn't alone in seeing the pattern. Elinor had noticed. Andre had noticed. The evidence was mounting, and the witnesses were paying attention. Grant's behavior grew more aggressive as the Lux account solidified. He started scheduling important meetings during times he knew I had conflicts. He reassigned team members who had become loyal to me. He began documenting minor issues with my work, building a paper trail of his own. I recognized this strategy immediately. He was preparing to get rid of me by firing me. But he had made a critical miscalculation. He assumed my value existed only within the company. He assumed that without Whitfield's resources, I would be nothing. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The first sign of real trouble came on a Tuesday morning. I arrived at the office to find an email from HR requesting a meeting to discuss performance concerns. The subject line was vague and professional, but the implication was clear. I forwarded the email to my personal account immediately. Then I printed a copy and added it to my folder. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 3 in the afternoon. I had to be planned and quick. This gave me 3 days to prepare, 3 days to strengthen my position, 3 days to reach out to people I trusted. Andre found me in the break room that afternoon, stirring a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. I heard about the HR meeting, he said quietly, leaning against the counter beside me. What are you going to do? I set down the spoon. I'm going to walk in there with documentation of every stolen idea, every redirected email, every time my work was presented under someone else's name. He nodded slowly, and if that doesn't work, then I'm going to remind them that I'm not the only one paying attention. Elinor Chase knows exactly who does the real work on her account, so do the contacts at 3 other major clients. If I leave, they might start asking uncomfortable questions. Andre was quiet for a moment. That's a nuclear option. I looked at him directly. I've spent 8 years being patient, being professional, being the person who keeps her head down and does excellent work and trusts that someone will eventually notice. I'm done waiting for permission to be valued. Do you understand? He held my gaze, then smiled slowly. It's about time. I can't believe you've been this patient. That conversation gave me the courage to make a phone call I had been avoiding. That evening, from my apartment in Hell's Kitchen, I dialed Elinor Chase's direct line. She answered on the second ring. Samantha, this is unexpected. I know. I apologize for calling outside business hours. But there's something I need to tell you, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. There was a pause. I could hear her settling into a chair, giving me her full attention. I'm listening. I took a deep breath. I've been called into an HR meeting on Friday. I believe Grant is trying to build a case against me. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I wanted to be transparent with you. Another pause. Then, Samantha, I'm going to be direct with you too. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I know when someone is doing the real work and when someone is taking credit for it. My throat tightened. Your vision is important to us. Whatever happens in that meeting, you should know that Lux's relationship is with you, not with Whitfield's letterhead. If you decide to explore other options, I want to be the first person you call. I exhaled slowly. Elinor, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just take care of yourself, document everything, and good luck. I will, thank you, Elinor. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The city hummed outside my window, indifferent to the small drama playing out on the 29th floor of a midtown tower. But inside that tower, the balance of power was about to shift. I opened my laptop and began composing an email. Not to HR, not to Grant. To a recruiter at Sterling and Partners, the largest marketing agency on the East Coast. They had reached out 6 months ago about a VP position. I had declined then, still loyal to a company that didn't deserve it. I had to take different steps now. This time, I wrote back. The interview with Sterling and Partners happened faster than I expected. Within 48 hours of sending that email, I was sitting in a sleek conference room in their financial district headquarters, talking with 3 senior executives who actually listened when I spoke. They asked about my experience. I told them. They asked about campaigns I had led. I showed them the documentation, the timestamps, the evidence of work that existed long before Grant Mercer had learned to spell Whitfield. By the end of the meeting, they offered me a position, Vice President of Client Strategy, a title I had earned years ago but never received, a salary that acknowledged my actual value, a team that would report to me, not around me. Finally, things were about to change. I couldn't even remember why I had waited this long. I asked for 48 hours to consider. They agreed. That evening, I called Alina Chase again. "I've been offered a VP position at Sterling," I said. "They want me to start in 2 weeks. Are you having doubts? What do you want?" "I want to do excellent work with people who see my value. I want to build campaigns I'm proud of. And I want to work with clients who trust me." "And then take the job," she said. "And when you're settled, call me. Lux will follow you wherever you go, trust me." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Wiser, more confident, smiling. The HR meeting was still scheduled for Friday at 3, but now it didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like an opportunity. As if so much time had passed. Have you ever felt that way? I spent Thursday evening preparing 2 folders. The first contained my documentation, 18 months of stolen credit, redirected communications, and erased contributions. The second contained my resignation letter, effective in 2 weeks. The resignation letter was shorter than I expected, 2 paragraphs. Professional, gracious. The kind of letter that gives no ammunition and leaves no bridges burning. I had learned long ago that the best exits are quiet ones. That night, Andre called me at home. "I heard about Sterling," he said. "Word travels fast." I laughed. "How did you hear?" "I have my sources." He paused. "I'm proud of you, Sam. You deserve this." "Thank you," I said quietly, "for seeing what was happening, for not letting me think I was crazy. You were never crazy, just patient, maybe too patient. Maybe, but patience got me here." He was quiet for a moment. "When you're settled at Sterling, let me know if you need a creative director. I might be ready for a change too." I smiled. "I'll remember that." Friday morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully, choosing a blazer that made me feel powerful and heels that clicked with purpose on the marble floors. The documentation folder went into my briefcase. The resignation letter went into my pocket. I felt powerful, like I was walking taller. At 2:45, I walked into the conference room where the HR meeting would take place. Grant was already there, sitting at the head of the table with a folder of his own. The HR director, a woman named Patricia, sat beside him with a neutral expression. "Samantha," Grant said, gesturing to a chair across from him, "please sit down." I sat. I placed my briefcase on the table but didn't open it. Patricia cleared her throat. "Samantha, we've called this meeting to discuss some concerns about your recent performance. Grant has brought to our attention several issues that we need to address." I listened as they laid out their case. Missed deadlines that weren't actually missed. Communication issues that existed only in Grant's imagination. Insubordination charges based on meetings I had attended without his explicit approval, meetings with clients who had requested my presence. When they finished, there was a pause. They were waiting for me to defend myself, to scramble, to negotiate. Instead, I opened my briefcase and removed my folder. "Before we continue," I said calmly, "I'd like to share some documentation of my own." For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through 18 months of evidence. Email threads showing my original ideas later presented by Grant as his own. Calendar entries proving I had been excluded from meetings I should have attended. Client communications praising work that had been credited to others. Patricia started playing with her hair, her expression shifting from neutral to uncomfortable. Grant's face went pale, as if he was frozen. When I finished, I placed one final document on the table, my resignation letter. "I've accepted a position at Sterling and Partners," I said, "Vice President of Client Strategy. My last day will be 2 weeks from today." The silence in that room was absolute. Grant stared at me like I had grown a second head. Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I stood up, gathered my documents, and walked toward the door. Then I paused and turned back. One more thing. Elena Chase at Lux Cosmetics asked me to let you know that she'll be reviewing their agency relationship in light of recent developments. She was very clear about who she trusts to handle her brand. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that conference room with my head high and my documentation folder tucked under my arm. Behind me, I could hear Grant's voice rising in panic, asking Patricia what this meant, what they were going to do, how they were going to explain this to the board. I didn't look back. I had already moved on. Believe me, it was a wonderful feeling. I felt light as a feather. There was a smile on my face that I couldn't hold back. The 2 weeks that followed were unlike anything I had experienced in 8 years at Whitfield. Word spread through the office like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew that I had resigned, that I had documentation, that Elena Chase was reconsidering her contract. Grant avoided me completely. He stopped attending meetings where I might be present. He communicated through intermediaries, through carefully worded emails that were clearly vetted by legal. The man who had once stolen my ideas without hesitation was now terrified of being in the same room with me. But the real shock came on Wednesday when Elena Chase made her move official. I was at my desk reviewing transition documents when my phone buzzed with a text from Andre. "Check your email." Now, I opened my inbox and found a message that had been sent to the entire Whitfield executive team from Elena Chase. Subject line, "Notice of contract termination." The email was brief and devastating. Lux Cosmetics was exercising the 60-day termination clause in their contract. They cited concerns about account management continuity and strategic alignment. They thanked Whitfield for their past partnership and wished them well in future endeavors. $8 million. Gone, just like that. Within an hour, 2 more clients followed suit. Catherine Morrison at Forge Fitness sent a similar notice, citing her preference to work with agencies that valued transparent attribution. Marcus Rivera at Nexus Systems requested an immediate meeting to discuss transitioning his account elsewhere. By the end of the week, Whitfield had lost 4 major clients representing nearly $15 million in annual revenue. The board called an emergency meeting. Grant was summoned to explain. I heard about that meeting from Andre, who had a friend in the executive assistant pool. Apparently, Grant spent 45 minutes trying to blame me for sabotaging client relationships. He called me vindictive, unprofessional, disloyal. But the executives had already seen the documentation. Patricia from HR had shared it with the CEO after our meeting, concerned about potential liability. They knew exactly who had built those client relationships and exactly who had tried to take credit for them. Grant was placed on administrative leave pending a full review. His office was cleared out by security the following Monday. My last day at Whitfield was quiet. I packed my personal belongings into a single cardboard box. A few sketches and notebooks, the framed photo of my mother and me at graduation. A coffee mug with a chip in the handle that I had never bothered to replace. Andre stopped by my desk as I was finishing up. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, watching me tape the box shut. "So this is it," he said. "This is it." He was quiet for a moment, then, "I submitted my resignation this morning. 2 weeks' notice, same as you." I looked up, surprised. "Andre, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to." He smiled. "But I want to. Sterling has an opening for a creative director, doesn't it?" I laughed, the first real laugh I had experienced in weeks. "How did you know about that?" "I have my sources." He pushed off from the doorframe and walked over to help me with the box. "Besides, I've been watching Grant take credit for your work for almost 3 years. I'm not interested in watching whoever replaces him do the same thing to someone else." We walked out of the building together, carrying my box between us as if it were very heavy. The security guard nodded as we passed. The elevator played its soft jazz one last time. Then we were outside, standing on the sidewalk in the cold afternoon air, looking up at the glass tower that had been my home for 8 years. "No regrets?" Andre asked. I thought about it, about the late nights and early mornings, about the campaigns I had built and the relationships I had nurtured, about the documentation folder that had saved me and the resignation letter that had set me free. Not a single one, I said. We hailed separate cabs and went our separate ways, but I knew it wasn't goodbye. It was just the beginning of something new. 6 months later, I stood at the window of my corner office at Sterling and Partners, watching the city lights flicker to life below. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Team dinner in 30 minutes. A celebration for closing our biggest quarter in company history. The Lux Cosmetics account had transferred seamlessly. Eleanor and I had worked together to rebuild their digital presence from the ground up, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Brand engagement was up 42%. Sales among the target demographic had increased by nearly a third. The campaign we created together was being studied in marketing courses at 3 different business schools. But Lux wasn't alone. Catherine Morrison brought Forge Fitness to Sterling within a month of my arrival. Marcus Rivera followed with Nexus Systems. Word spread through the industry that there was a new player in town, a VP who actually did the work and actually got the credit. Andre joined me 2 months in, taking over as creative director for our entire client strategy division. We built a team of 12 people who trusted each other, supported each other, and never had to worry about their ideas being stolen by someone with a bigger title. As for Grant Mercer, I heard he tried to land at a few smaller agencies after Whitfield let him go. But reputations travel fast in this industry. The documentation I had compiled didn't just save my career, it ended his. Last I heard, he was doing freelance consulting work out of a shared office space in New Jersey. No team, no clients, no one left to steal from. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I didn't need to. Success was its own satisfaction. My mother visited the new office last month. She walked through the halls with wide eyes, taking in the modern furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the nameplate on my door that read, Samantha Thornton, Vice President. She stopped in front of that nameplate for a long moment, then she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "You really did it. I can see that your soul is happy." I hugged her tight. "I made it with your support. The late-night phone calls, every piece of advice, every time you told me to keep going when I wanted to give up." She laughed and wiped her eyes. "I just made muffins and asked questions. You did the hard part." That night, after my mother had gone home and the office had emptied out, I sat alone at my desk reviewing the documentation folder one last time. Then I closed it and put it in a drawer. I didn't need it anymore. But I would never forget what it taught me. My name is Samantha Thornton. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. The situation you're in right now, the boss who takes credit, the system that overlooks you, the company that treats your loyalty as weakness, whatever your story is, it doesn't have to be permanent. Stop waiting and start demanding. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full Orange File playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.